right, so this is the edited version of the webinar, which was a basic, very, very basic intro to professional coaching. I am Jessie LaCosta. I am the founder of Bluebeard Strategies, the Hawk Collaborative, and Hawkeye Coaching. Hawkeye Coaching is actually a course to train others to become professional veteran development coaching. So the focus is on military veterans and reservists. However, the learning can be applied to pretty much anybody in a career transition. So this was just a basic webinar on the I guess a simplistic way of looking at coaching for those who haven't really read much or who don't know much about coaching as a tool or as a career. And when I mean coaching, we're talking about professional or personal coaching. Close to life coaching, although in this stance, we're using it usually more for career transition or career management. So here's the way that I define coaching. It's co-facilitated and co-directed change. It's a process by which one person is going to support and assist, if you think of it as a partnership, for another person's growth. So you often hear us called as the coaches, and our clients are called the coachees. And the engagement of the process usually focuses around some stated goal or objective. It can be a specific career transition. It can be to find more clarity in work and lifestyle balance. It might be communication coaching. It could be executive coaching for a high-level executive who just needs that supportive, safe, and honest, critical, in a non-judgmental way, which can be an interesting balance for the coach to produce. For that executive to be able to, in a sense, brainstorm ideas around management and team or company growth, as well as have some very honest and clear discussions around his or her actions, thoughts, and behaviors. Now, coaches will often be able to partner in this collaborative process by removing the barriers to success. So barriers might be thought processes. It might be actual physical behavior that the client is going through. And then above and beyond the barriers, it may just be creating new foundations for heightened productivity or improved thought processes. So there are some expectations in coaching, and that is that both the coach and the client are very dedicated to the process, that there is a sense of openness, that the coach can, ask inspired questions, and that the client feels that she or he is in a trusting relationship so that things can be brought forth that need to be brought forth. It's a very respectful relationship. Often in coaching, the coach will assign homework. And then there's this idea of actually being ready for coaching. Coaching is very forward moving. It's very often about the future. It's not necessarily about diagnosing or fixing the past. So the client needs to be ready and willing to make the necessary efforts to bring about change. In order to understand this or to assess this, some of the very basic components of coaching would be to have an intake or a screening process. From there, you might have a questionnaire where they could be rolled into one. So sometimes coaches will do this in an introductory phone call. Just asking things like, what are the top 3 goals that you have for using a coach? How will you know that your money has been invested wisely? Are there any things that would get in the way of you accomplishing your goals? Sometimes it's done in a conversation about what coaching is and what coaching isn't, and then followed by the intake, the screening, or the questionnaire. And so depending on the coach and the type of clients that coach usually works with, that may influence how the questionnaire is designed. There are some things that coaches need to understand from an ethical and a legal standpoint about what can be on that questionnaire and what can't be. And sometimes that depends on the state. Some states require that coaches have some type of language either on their questionnaire or even their agreements or on both that clearly designate that the coach is not a medical professional, or that coach is not acting as a medical professional and not offering medical advice. The coach is not a counselor. So there are things that go along with coaching that professional coaches understand to be part of the process. Then there are agreements. Now, when I teach people about coaching, I am a huge proponent of having written agreements. You could call them contracts. You could call them client forms, but in these agreements, clearly spell out what the goals or the objectives are of the client that you as a coach are going to be working on the client with to achieve. It will state how long the coaching engagement is. Maybe it's 6 sessions over the course of 2 months. Maybe it's an initial agreement of 3 sessions, 45 minutes each via Skype. The agreement will also spell out in some place perhaps the style of coaching. Maybe it's career coaching, executive coaching, communication coaching. As I mentioned earlier, depending on the laws required for each coach's state or the level of comfort the coach has with writing out a more formal agreement, it may often include that language about not being a medical practitioner. The coaching agreement may even include language that the client is responsible for the change and the coach is merely creating a foundation, a supportive foundation, and offering tools and resources. However, the client must initiate and implement the plans, the coaching plans. So there are all different ways of having agreements, but professional coaches usually do use some form of written agreement. And then there's ethics of coaching. What's really interesting is that coaching as a field is not currently regulated. It may be heading in that direction. So ethics, sometimes this is kind of vague about what a coach can and can't do and what a client should expect from a coach. I strongly encourage coaches, new coaches especially, to read as much information about ethics as possible. There are a couple of really good books out there. I know that those questions came through earlier, and when we get to the end, what I'll do is I'll email everybody who is interested in that the one book that I do advise on the law and ethics for coaches. You know, one thing that I'll bring out here, because I know this was a question that came in, so and I see it. Yeah, okay, absolutely. So, okay, yes. All right, so the chat function is going off here. So, one of the things to understand, because it's not regulated, there have been instances where coaches, and these are rare, but they happen, where coaches have been subpoenaed to court. And the thing is, I've seen this on so many websites where coaches say that your conversations are completely confidential and strictly confidential. We look at legal language. Confidential and privilege are slightly two different things. But let's just talk about it in general terms for those who don't have a legal background and don't want to be confused with the word of privilege versus confidential. So let's just call it confidentiality, meaning that you're not going to share the information. By the way, in that confidential clause, it's very good to have that in the agreement so that the client clearly understands what the nature of the relationship is and when things are confidential, when they're not. So moving backwards again to make sure I answer this question from one of the participants. So as a coach, we are not protected by what is called privilege. So, like a medical professional is. Let's say a company hires me as a coach to work with 2 staff members that they deem as what we call high potentials, right? So those 2 people are just around the corner from getting a big promotion. So they're high potentials, but they're, for whatever reason, the hiring managers or their supervisors feel like they're just a step away and they need a little bit of support to kind of get them over that hump. So these 2 people are hired by me. So I'm coaching these people. We're doing, maybe they're a team of creatives at an ad agency, and that's why I'm coaching both of them at the same time. So first off, the supervisor and then the 2 staff members, the 3 of them and I will meet, and we will define what information can be shared and what information can't be shared. Because remember, the supervisor is the one that wanted me to coach the 2 staff members. The company is the one that pays. So we go over what we're willing to share, what we're not willing to share. Perhaps we have a weekly status, but then there's a lot of information that's going to be confidential. Then I have the 2 staff members sign something that reinforces that even while they're in a group coaching session, that whatever comes up in that coaching session is still confidential, only known to the 3 of us, unless it's something that we have agreed to share with a supervisor. So let's say somewhere along the line, the 2 staff members end up getting into a huge fight. One quits, one stays. But remember, they're a creative team. And for those who don't understand advertising agencies, often when you see a commercial or a print ad, it's created by 2 people, a team. One may be the writer and one may be the creative designer, and it's almost as if they're a package deal. So now the company's kind of in a quandary, and I'm in a quandary as a coach, because one leaves, one stays. The one that leaves, maybe she thinks she's going to find work and she can't find work. She sues the company for hiring me as the coach, saying that the coaching, inspired her to leave on her own. Now she can't find work. The company says, well, we know that wasn't the case, but we're going to have to subpoena Jessie in, because we need to prove that we did not encourage her to do that, nor did her partner, and nor did her coach. At that point, my notes are actually not completely confidential. So that's an extreme example, but if you're interested in coaching and you do some internet web searching, you will find that there have been some court cases. So whether you are thinking about becoming a coach or you just took this because you're thinking about hiring a coach, there is a difference between a high quality coach. Now, because the field is not regulated, not every high quality coach will be certified. Not everybody will be board certified. I'm not even saying that everybody needs to be certified. I do believe strongly that good quality coaches continue their education and continue their training. Now, if you are thinking about becoming a coach, know that it is possible and probably probable that the coaching industry will become regulated in the future. So I would encourage you to look into approved training programs, whether they're approved through ICF or approved through CCE under the BCC credential. There's a few other ones out there, but ICF and International Coach Federation and CCE, Center for Credentialing and Education, are probably the 2 main ones for now, at least in America, that you'd want to look at and go through their approved training programs. Now, in full disclosure, one of my programs is approved through CCE for the BCC credential, and that is the Hawkeye Coach Training Program. But I would encourage you to look for training that resonates with you and that aligns with your goals, whether it be mine or someone else's. Now, one of the things that I notice a lot is the misperception of what coaching is. And we often think of it, I shouldn't say we, but a lot of times people think of it as training or mentoring. And sometimes those can be part of coaching if you're doing or using a hybrid approach. But counseling, it is not. We are not going backwards in time. We might go backwards the tiniest bit if we have to, but in general terms, we are not going backwards in time with our clients to diagnose. Okay, I see a question over there. I'll get to that in just a second. So here's what I like to say. We meet people where they are, so we're not going to judge them where they are, and together hold them in a safe, supportive space, promoting and engaging for the highest potential to move forward. That's how I think that coaches can show up. Now, in terms of that question that just came in, again, because it's not regulated, it gets a little gray here. There are many licensed clinical psychologists and psychiatrists who are now becoming certified coaches. There are some new, more leading edge or cutting edge counseling and therapy techniques that do look and sound and feel more like coaching. From what I do understand, and I am not an attorney, but from what I do understand from an ethical standpoint, you are either a coach or you are a therapist in that relationship. You are not both. Now, as a therapist, you might use more coaching modalities, but you are more therapist than coach, right? You're probably going to diagnose. You may come up with a treatment plan. You may use theories that are based on the mind and maybe cognitive behavioral therapy. You may be using other trauma-based support. That's great. As a coach, you are not diagnosing. Because keep in mind, as a clinical licensed therapist, the minute you start coaching, you are not protected, right? At least from what I understand. And double check your state laws. But if you don't know, play it on the safe side. Because coaching is about moving forward. And obviously therapy can be as well. But coaching is not about diagnosis. And maybe that's the biggest difference there. As a coach, I don't say, wow, she must be bipolar, so I better try all this. First off, if I do believe my client is suffering from any other challenges that I am not qualified to treat, I need to refer that client out to a therapist or some type of other helping professional, social worker. I can work with a client who is also in treatment, but in that case, I might have my client sign what's called an informed consent form that allows me to reach out to the other helping professional so that I understand what that person is doing from a treatment standpoint, and that my work and my exercises and my homework only enhances it and would never chip away at what that treatment is doing. So since this is a basic webinar, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole because it can get, like I said, it can get a little dicey in terms of understanding the difference. If you are a clinical therapist, definitely find out about the laws in your state. And if you aren't able to, or you're unsure, you're already in practice, err on the safe side. And, if you have to, you might have coaching sessions versus therapy sessions, but probably the safest way to go is to refer your client out to another therapist if you'd prefer to do the coaching, or refer your client out to a coach if you'd prefer to do the therapy. And again, some people have different feelings on this, but until the field is regulated, you want to really protect yourself. Now, coaches can get liability insurance. I just don't know that it will cover in the same way that a clinical counselor would be able to be covered. So let's get back to some of the basics. Why do people use coaches? Very much for a career, and not just I want to get job XYZ, help me get there, but sometimes it's I don't know what I want to do. I just know I don't want to do this anymore. Often I mention the communication coaching for interpersonal communication skills. There are many personal brand coaches out there. I started doing personal branding about maybe 9 or 10 years ago. To actually develop a career roadmap. So not just to have that coaching conversation that's supportive, but to have something that's a plan. Sometimes people need coaching just to improve their confidence. For decision-making skills, resumes, you can see it just goes on and on. These are just a few. Now, I wanted to use a quote that wasn't about my coaching, but I needed to do this quickly. And I wanted to share this because It's a real quote from a former client of mine, and I'd rather you read it just for what she got, not because it was from me. But it says, working with Jessie has been a life-changing experience, both professionally and personally. Her coaching not only helped me to better articulate the ideas I wanted to share in the workplace, but she also helped me drill down to reveal and dissolve the barriers I put up when communicating with certain audiences. Beyond the communication coaching, she helped me to begin a process of self-understanding, to discover what truly motivates me and what my mission in life is. So sometimes people come to coaching to access a part of themselves that has been buried down deep or has been covered up, kind of like an antique in an antique shop that has so much dust on it that everybody passes it by. But if one person just shook that dust off, wow, maybe there would be a bidding war for this beautiful, beautiful piece. The other thing is that sometimes what is buried down so deep is the access to purpose. Why am I here on this earth? Now that sometimes will be closer to life coaching. However, it will come up in career management and career coaching. So here's just some statistics that I thought I would share. Now this is from the ICF Global Consumer Awareness. It says 42.6% of respondents who had experienced coaching chose to optimize individual and or team performance as their motivation for being coached. And in that reason ranked highest, followed by expanding professional career opportunities. So you can see that people are using coaching for things other than spiritual guidance or specific life coaching. Now, I said that I train people to become coaches and that we would just very, very quickly look at the Hawkeye coach method or process. So let me tell you a little bit about the hawk and why I chose the hawk. And so the hawk has come into my life in so many places ever since I moved to California. And so initially I thought something about it really resonated with me, but before I just named it because of this bird that flies above, that I would research from different cultures. And I was drawn more to the Native American meanings, but research from different cultures what the hawk symbolized. So as you can see it here, attention, vision, power, energy, leadership, intensity. It says the hawk wants us to be very keenly aware of our own power and the power we have over others. It also represents the need to have and hold a higher vision, not overlooking important details, but also striving to see and achieve the bigger picture. And this next part really just connected with me on the level of, wow, this is what coaching does. Hawk also encourages us to free ourselves from limiting thoughts and behavior and to open ourselves to change, a better and a brighter future. Hawk also teaches us about clarity, illumination, and focus on correct paths for a purposeful life. Now, when you're coaching with a client, you don't choose the correct path for a purposeful life, but you support your client so that he or she chooses the best correct path relative to goals and dreams and visions. So I'm going to do a very, very brief overview of the Hawkeye process. I'm doing this because a couple of people on the call are looking into the class. And again, I said that this process I use throughout most of my coaching, even if it's not with a veteran, even if I'm coaching an executive or a small business owner. So we talk about IA, AI, and IA. Inquire and acknowledge, assess and initiate, implement and instill accountability. So in the initial stages of the coaching process, what we do is we inquire about our coach's desired goals, challenges. So this is kind of that intake part, and then it's followed by a little bit more of that even in the first one or two coaching calls. So because what happens in the intake is the client may say, well, these are my top 3 goals. I have 3 months to do it. I don't really have any obstacles. And then once you get into the first coaching engagement, the goals may shift a little bit. You might find out about a few obstacles that weren't shared in the intake. So you're going to have this happen a little bit in the beginning, 1, 2, maybe even 3 coaching calls. So then you move into acknowledgement. So acknowledgement is not, again, it's not about diagnosing or problem solving, but it's acknowledging what the client needs. It's acknowledging the strengths that you already see in your client from the very start, the value, how that person shows up in a positive way. And it also means that you are acknowledging anything that may not be serving that client well if the client shares that. I acknowledge in coaching calls all the time that, things do appear to be challenging, and then I may reframe it. But I believe that acknowledgement first is part of what sets the trust process and the trust foundation. Some coaches believe that you don't want to acknowledge anything that's negative and you move right over to just shifting into the positive, and that's good if it works. For me, I like that place of acknowledgement of the full picture, if you will. And so from acknowledgement, we move to assessing and then initiating. So this is where you might do it informally, you might do it formally with actual assessments. They can be strength-based assessments, value-based assessments, communication style assessments. There are so many different assessments that you can use. It might also be that it's more informal in a sense that through the coaching questions and dialogue, you start uncovering what the challenges really entail and start working with your client to reframe how the client sees the challenges, to shift the thinking, to move the negative thinking into the thinking of potential and possibility. And so from there, you start, looking at how am I going to create plans? What's going to work for this client? You might have some homework involved. There's, keep in mind that this is just a framework. It's not like step 1 through step 6 and you're done. This is a framework for a process of coaching. So again, in the assess, you're really looking at deep styles of challenges. I'm sorry, not deep styles, but how should I say this? Oh yeah, I like that. So a deeper probe into someone's situation. And we then initiate strategies and plans. So it could be short-term, medium-term, and long-term objectives. Now, some coaches never ever use formalized plans. Some coaches do. For me, it depends on the client, whether I used a formalized coaching plan or not. And some clients I share the plan with and that we fill it out together. So I have at the bottom this phrase from Thomas Edison: vision without execution is hallucination. So the last 2 steps, which is implement and instill accountability, is in the final phase, and that is the actual plan or the homework. It could be action plans, it could be homework. The accountability part is something that the coach really holds the client up to. So some of this is woven all throughout the process. This is very dynamic. You could be coaching somebody and start and inquire and acknowledge and move through, assess, initiate so quickly, and you start to implement and instill accountability, and the client is not being accountable. And so then you have to kind of go back to the assessment phase and figure out what's going on. I mean, maybe there's actually a really good reason the client's not being accountable, but what is it? What's that obstacle getting in the way? So accountability is also to the coach, and that's to the coach to make sure that if you are not achieving the objectives set out or the goals of your client, that you understand why. Is it because along the way you shifted those goals? Is it because the client isn't showing up, or is it because you're not showing up? Very, very, very talented coaches can have coaching engagements that just don't seem to be productive. Sometimes there's not a fit. And from my standpoint as an ethical coach, I'm not going to take someone's money if I don't think it's working for them. It doesn't matter who's at, I don't want to say at fault, but who's at the basis of it not working. But accountability is as much for the coach as it is for the client. So coaching conversations, I hinted a little bit about this. They're forward and future directed. You hear a lot of what's versus why. Coaches try to usually stick to 1 to 2 sentence questions. In a neutral stance. They use a lot why of reframing. Implies judgment. What does not. That's more objective. Let me think of another situation. If anybody wants to send me a question and pretend they're the client. And a lot of people that love mentoring come into coaching, and it can be a struggle and a challenge to just shift the language slightly, just slightly. And for those listening in that are experienced coaches, so the more I thought about it, I figured that I would interject and share with everybody a better version of a coaching conversation. Since I said I'm so much more used to being reflective, and so on the spot, I can't say that I am able to mirror a coaching conversation as easily. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to share this with everybody on the call. And here's a conversation. I'm just going to read part of it. It's inside actually the training portal, and it comes from a real engagement that I had with a client. So let me just give you the backdrop. So there was a gentleman, and he was concerned with a hole in his resume, and he had a lot of anxiety about networking. So after a few sessions, and I understood a little bit better about who he was and, what obstacles he faced, what challenges, and what were the opportunities, I decided to offer an exercise. So here's something where it's kind of a combination of an insider's view of both homework / exercise / coaching conversation. So the exercise was for him to take a walk in his neighborhood and approach 1 or 2 people, offering a hello, hey, how are you, something like that. And what happened is he talked about actually running into a gentleman in his apartment building who worked for a local university. So here's sort of like what the conversation went like. Fred, tell me more about this gentleman. How did you find out where he works? Oh, that was easy. We were in the elevator and I overheard him mention it to someone else. So, did you attempt to join in the conversation? Heck no, I couldn't do that. I can't do that. So, Fred, are you saying that you aren't able to do that, or are you saying you prefer not to jump in on others' conversations? Neither. I just feel I can't do it. Fred, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. So it sounds like jumping in might feel overwhelming. Please tell me if I'm wrong here. Never thought about it that way. But, yeah, I guess when I think about it, I do feel overwhelmed. I'm just not good with strangers. When I think about it even right now, my chest really gets tight. So looking back, do you think you felt that, like in your chest at that moment when you were in the elevator? Well, sure, I'm sure I did. Was there anything else you felt or thought about? Yeah, I guess I felt like I might say something stupid or look stupid. So I can imagine if it felt that way, I might not speak either. Can you tell me about a situation where you feel smart? Now, here's where you noticed I did go backwards a little bit because we were talking about an exercise and homework. But notice that very quickly, I moved Fred back into the future, back into forward momentum. When I shift to saying, can you tell me about a situation where you feel smart? So then Fred says, well, when I volunteer at, just think of any place, I know I'm giving back, and people tell me I've helped. I don't even question that. I mean, I know I feel good when I'm there. Okay, Fred, so what is it that you do there when you are feeling good? So now I'm having Fred, in his mind, connect with something very real that he can feel success for and about, okay? So while we're going forward, we're also tapping into reality. So this isn't about something that's completely esoteric, and that's what a coach does. A coach brings about clarity. Clarity not just about obstacles in the way, but clarity about somebody's strength, clarity about someone's potential. Oh, sure, when new volunteers come in, I prep them, I show them around, and then the new volunteers are being placed in the right situations. Fred, it sounds like you were doing a good job of planning, accessing resources, also dealing with strangers. So now I've helped to identify and clarify some of his talents since Fred wasn't using those kind of words. Remember, we're working with Fred on career, so I want to be able to connect his value with language that can be used in interviews, resumes, and cover letters. Yeah, I can see that now. I never thought about them being strangers before. Fred, can you humor me and try something this week? And if it truly doesn't resonate with you, no need for it. But I would like to try something, okay? So now I'm moving into some more homework. Oh boy, sounds like homework. Fred, I want you to get into the elevator at a time that you think that gentleman may be on it. No need to talk shop, but just introduce yourself. I feel anxious just thinking about it, but I will try. Fred, what do you picture right now if you were to do this? What would it look like, you introducing yourself to him? All right, and then I go on and on and on. And then I ask him what he's going to gain by doing this and what he might lose by not doing it. So again, this wasn't a sophisticated conversation, but I wanted to draw out how something very simplistic does have nuances in strategy and how it's grounded in this concept of when we help a client project forward of possibilities, even if that includes some challenges, we are able to create a more realistic picture that our client can connect with, tap into, that our client may feel aligned with. And so that potential becomes much more of a reality. So I wanted to jump in and share this. I wanted to share it with everybody who was on the call and include it in the recorded presentation to give a much clearer picture of how powerful coaching conversations can be. In the coach training program, I also have recorded coaching conversations, real conversations for students to listen to, and that sometimes is very helpful as well. So the one-sentence questions. People that love to talk, I'm one of them, therapists, social workers, certain people tend to have very long-winded questions. I'm one of them. So this definitely was a challenging part of my coach training, which is to keep the sentences very short and create the space for the client to answer. So, here's a way of having a 1 to 2 sentence question. So you said that you're afraid of rejection. What does rejection mean to you? If you could define it. And you end it there. My typical way, if I were more of a mentor, where I'd kick into the more of the inquisitive person and not the coach. Wow, so you say that rejection is something that really bothers you. I mean, what do you think's behind that? I mean, if you could, look at rejection, I mean, that in 1934, rejection was defined as, okay, we don't want to do that. We want to say as little as possible to create the floor for our coach clients to stand on and to bring about the value that each one of those people have, bring it about so that we then can have more productive, efficient, and effective conversations, that we're not lecturing. You've heard me say reframing. Coaches use a lot of reframing, just like therapists do. But when we reframe, we try not to put anything in there that wasn't in there before. So somebody says, I am so angry with my boss. My boss is just always putting me down. I just have to leave this job. A reframing could be, so what I'm hearing is that work is very frustrating for you, and that potentially we might create a plan for you to either find a better way to work with your boss or to find a new place to work. Would that look good to you right now? Do you think that we could work on that? So that's one way of reframing. There are so many different ways of reframing that in a good training program, you'll learn. And just again, it's what could or what would versus why it can't or why it didn't work. So this was a very quick, basic webinar here. And if anybody's interested, as I said, I do train people to do coaching. So you will see that there is a I'm sorry, caught on the side and on the chat window there. Absolutely. So I do want to be clear. Hawkeye Coach Training has two different tracks. One is to become a certified coach. It is an approved training program if you think that you're going to go on to sit for the boards to become a board certified coach. In fact, it was the first approved training program specifically to focus on veteran development in the country that the CCE approved. However, you may just want to do training in the coaching field. Maybe you don't want to become a certified coach. So there's track B that's completely self-paced, totally online. You won't have any interactive with the students. Again, if you go to track A, that's to become a full certified Hawkeye coach. You do not need to move on to board certification, but if you choose to, it is an approved program. You usually come in with a cohort. Classes are small, sometimes 5, 7 people. The dialogue is robust. I keep hearing from people that it's like having a new family. And so our next session starts September 4th. If you go to coachesforveterans.com, click on the training tab, you'll learn more about that. There's also an enroll tab. And if you use the following discount, WebCoach20, you will get a 20% discount off of it. So thank you again. And for those who are watching this later, you'll be watching a slightly abbreviated version of this, but hopefully you got even just one good nugget out of it. And if you want, you can email me questions. You can find the contact information off of coachesforveterans.com/training. If you're watching this from the recorded session, and I'll try my best to answer your questions.